All of a sudden, for the first time in, 45, 46 years, I wasn't quite sure who I was anymore. My name's Jodie Denman. Growing up, I had a really good life. Lots of fantastic memories from my childhood. My dad used to love to drive. We saw a lot of Tassie, so we'd often go for day trips and they'd pack all the gear, make salad rolls, and we'd take that and we'd be away for the whole day. Dad and I had a really special relationship. Whenever Dad was out in the garden, I was always proud to be Dad's little helper, so I was always out there with him, probably being more of a hindrance than a help, but everywhere that he was, I just wanted to be. So when Dad was outside, building things, he'd give me a block of wood and a hammer and some nails, and I'd sit there and hammer nails into my little block of wood just so I could be like him. And that continued on into later in life too, of course. Mum was a stay-at-home mum, and she was our constant. She was just steadfast in every which way, a constant presence. Very unassuming, never one to bring attention to herself. And then there was my older brother, and we were typical siblings, love-hate relationship at times. I grew up with a younger brother who has quite a severe disability. He's non-verbal, and it was during a time where there wasn't a lot of societal acceptance, I think, still about disabilities. Mum and Dad sort of didn't like people knowing about our business, and I don't know, because there just wasn't a lot of understanding back then. But he came with us. He was very much obviously part of our family. From all accounts, I had a really good upbringing. I work at Autism Tasmania. Sort of got thrown into a career change, I suppose, when my children got diagnosed with autism, and it kind of threw me into a whole new direction as far as my career. Part of my role is to go around and do training and educate others. Obviously something that's very, very close to my heart. One of my most memorable days at work, probably not for the actual thing that actually happened at work, but what happened afterwards. So I'd had this really, really excellent day at work. I'd run a parent workshop with a group of parents out in the northern suburbs, and I'd come away feeling really good about myself. It was a really positive workshop, and I felt like that I'd really made a difference in some people's lives. Pulled into the driveway, as I do every day and after work, and walked to the letterbox to collect the mail. And I saw 2 letters. Sort of the first one was sort of non-dismissive. It was just like, oh yeah, Bill or whatever. The second one grabbed my attention because there was no identifying marks on the envelope. Ripped it open, had a look, and inside was this strip of paper with 6 typewritten words on it. You are adopted, full stop, did you know, ? I remember being shocked beyond belief. I had this innate feeling that it was true. And my mum was living with me at the time. And I took the letter in and I sat it in front of her and asked her directly, Mum, have you got something that you need to tell me? And my mum looked down at this note and she said to me, who sent you that? And I said, well, I don't know. And I asked her straight out, I said, is it true? And she looked up at me and she said, no, don't be ridiculous. Of course it's not. And I remember in that moment thinking to myself, I don't think I believe you. And then I just remember going into my room, into my bedroom, and sort of thinking, what can I do? Who can I talk to? Who can I ask? And ended up ringing one of my dad's family members. When I told them about the note, they actually laughed and said, oh, that must be a joke. Don't be so ridiculous. And actually said to me that, oh, maybe your neighbour got one as well. And I hounded my mum for the next, 2 days. I remember travelling with her in the car. We were going to Eastlands. I just remember I was kind of so hyper alert and hyper vigilant about this. Like it had just been taking over my whole thought process. And I remember in the car ride there, I kept saying to her that I had contacted the Adoption Services Department, saying to her, Either way, Mum, I'm going to find out the truth. So it would be a lot better coming from you. And there was deathly silence until we got to Eastlands, and we just pulled into a car spot when my mum turned to me and just said, "If you must know, you and Scott were both adopted." For all intents and purposes, I'd almost steeled myself for believing that it was true about my adoption. But at no point at any time had I ever considered that my older brother was also adopted. So that was like totally out of left field and just added to the shock. And I just remember thinking, who actually am I? And the fact that, my brother passed away and didn't even know that he was adopted, and maybe that could have helped him. I kind of almost had this righteous anger about that as well. You sit there once you've learnt this and you kind of reflect and you think, everybody knew. Yeah, so it was kind of like interesting for them, I suppose, too, after all these years, to even be able to talk about it. But mainly their point of interest was who had let the cat out of the bag. So I was adopted I was born in 1970, so in the 70s, which was still in the era of forced adoptions. I asked my mum what was the reason why that her and Dad never told me that neither Scott or I were adopted. And she explained to me at the time that they were told that it would be detrimental to us to actually to know. Mum and Dad being of that generation that never questioned authority, and so they just took that on board and lived life. And sometimes I think maybe after a while maybe they even forgot that Scott and I were adopted, because we were certainly never treated any differently. So maybe, in their eyes, it was so deeply buried that they never thought anything otherwise. Initially, I remember not even being able to look at my mum. I was just so angry. Mum was living with me and had been doing so since my dad passed away the year before. My house is quite small, so sort of avoiding Mum and not talking to her probably lasted for a few hours. And it was difficult for my mum because my dad wasn't here, to help stand with her to deal with this together. So it came to that point where I just had to reconcile my feelings and choose to actually forgive her. After I found out that I was adopted, one of the first people I rang was a girlfriend that I work with, who I knew was also adopted. Never in all the years that I worked with her did I ever think that we would end up with the connection that we did. So she was a fantastic support. And taking the week off work, in hindsight, was a really, really good thing to do, because it just gave me, more headspace to be able to process and digest everything. I don't know, it's hard to sort of downplay, and I don't want to downplay. It was a monumental happening in my life. I needed to give it the time that it deserved. So family's always been hugely important to me. Outside of my own kids as well, they're my everything. I went through this time where it's almost like you grieved the loss of a family or who you were in the first instance, because suddenly you weren't the person that you thought you were. And then through the process, I think I realised that, the intrinsic me, or the intrinsic part of me, hadn't altered through this process. I've managed to connect with members of my biological family. So in a sense, my family has grown. So the definition of family hasn't really changed for me through all of this. I guess sometimes I ask myself, where to from here? And there are certain aspects of this that still remain unresolved for me. Having lost both mum and dad in recent years, my mum a couple of years ago and dad 10 years ago now. And my brother was 28 years this year, so he was, he's been gone as long as what he was here on earth. That, it just makes me value them more. I still have their ashes, so I'm going to intern those soon. I guess that will sort of close one chapter for me, knowing that they're all at rest. So, some things still remain unresolved.